Okay, we are live a few minutes late. Sorry, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are waiting on Yasmine Mohammed, who will be here shortly, but we wanted to go ahead and get started because there's so much going on right now in the world and there's so much to discuss. So why not jump right in? As you may know, if you've been following around with our book club, we are the Institute for Liberal Values. And so we have picked Yasmine Mohammed's book, Unveiled, because it really talks about, it brings into question liberal values, what they are, and honestly, where they fail at times. And so I think that was a real major point of her book. And so she'll be here soon to talk about that some more. Mars is going to kind of take us the lead for us. Mars, I know that you've been friends with Yasmine for a while. If you wanted to kind of get us started and get the conversation going while we wait for her to jump online.
Sure. So the topic of Islam, one of my how I got into all this in the first place, how I got into our current culture wars, is because I spent a lot of time in the intellectual community. One of my you can lock me in a room with four other people, and we can talk about philosophy, like do we have free will, what do utilitarianism, deontology, and everything, and all those other topics have to do with moral philosophy or whatever. But way back when, I encountered a problem in the progressive community that was pretty much communicated by someone I consider a mentor. We were very much into criticizing fundamentalist religion, but we noted that progressives turned a blind eye to other fundamentalist religions, such as Islam. And when it was a betrayal and a slap in our face when we realized that these quote unquote progressives didn't honor the held double standards, especially when it came to gay rights, women's rights, and human rights across the board. And that's how I encountered the stories of Muslim reformists, ex-Muslims such as Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Yasmine Mohammed, whose story I encountered through meeting and encountering several ex-Muslims online. I became very familiar with the story. It really touched that side of me that is very much concerned with human progress, and I thought it was atrocious how she and others were treated in this kind of regressive leftism, regressive progressivism, as I call it, and decided that we had to do something about it.
Mars, you might want to give us a little preview too, because you're the one who introduced me to the Clarity Coalition, and that's something that Yasmine is very involved in and a part of, and kind of what the purpose and the mission behind that is with regards to radical ideologies.
So radical Islam is one of the more controversial topics that we have to deal with today. There was an incident that happened several years ago in which, well, let me give you a little bit of a background behind that. When we're talking about consistency in human values, we're talking about consistency across the board. I mentioned women's rights and gay rights. We want to see those happen not just for people in one society, but we want to be able to support liberalism, people who are supporting liberal values across the globe. And when we see these progressives in other countries who want the same things we want, it's a slap in the face when you're propping up values and cultures and ideas that are inimical to them. And more often than not, in today's regressive leftist culture, in some kind of insane moral inversion, rather than taking up the side of the people who are truly oppressed, you're actually propping up cultures, governments, and ideas that are in the reverse of the direction we want to go in. And to deal with this, we've had to bring together groups of people who see this inconsistency, this kind of hypocrisy, and we want to work against it to try to push for actual progressivism, actual liberalism, actual human rights. And that's where organizations, not just the Clarity Coalition, although that's the coalition that I'm very much a part of, in which we assemble a large group of people, progressive Muslims, former Muslims, atheists, Christians, Jews, a whole team of people who want to work towards this common goal. And this is how we hope to be able to bring a sane, reasonable voice towards pushing for actual progressivism rather than the regressivism we see today.
Yeah, I'd love to, while we're waiting for Yasmine to come on, obviously the world has changed a little bit in the past couple of days with Iran, and I'm really looking forward to getting some of Yasmine's insights on that. But I'd love to just get some feedback from everyone here and how that it relates to what we've been discussing with regards to liberalism and in Islam, radical Islam.
I mean, I don't know, nothing shocks me anymore, but it's disappointing to see people come out against, the war, in the sense that we're trying to free the people, the suffering of, the oppressed, that you would think those who are, you know, championing human rights would be advocating for, what the U.S. and Israel is doing, and yet there's a lot of, I don't know if it's ignorance or just more dogma and ideology preventing people from seeing the bigger picture, which is, this really is a battle of good versus evil. I mean, if there was ever a binary, this is it. But I think, I mean, that's why I'm interested. Actually, that was one of the questions I had for Yasmin, is if we can't agree on this being such a, clear black and white kind of, good and evil, where is the common ground going to start? I don't know. Curious what the folks here think. Because to me, it goes back to the big, when we talked about in, the session, the first session, the second session, what are the big buckets, right? It's a death culture versus a sanctity of life culture, a power culture versus a love culture. I mean, like, these are very different, societies that, want to dominate. And yeah, so I'm blabbering, but that's where my mind goes, is how can people be against what, at least for me, is so clear.
I would love to hear more. Our last conversation, Diana, you really took the lead on it, talking about power culture, love culture. And I'd really love to hear you frame that a little bit more, particularly with what you were just referencing with what's happening right now. Before you do, though, I wanted to remind everyone that if you are watching from ILV's YouTube or ILV's X, any questions that you have, you can start to put them into the chat, and we will get to address audience questions shortly after we get Yasmin on here. We just lost Diana. So Mars, take that, or Wink, take that power versus love culture and kind of what you're seeing and how it's playing out today.
Well, I think sadly people I think are predisposed to a certain lens of perceiving reality. And so I think unfortunately, if people come into the worldview or lens, how bad, Islam good, or Washington, D.C. bad, Tehran good, I think that unfortunately, I suspect a number of people do come into the conflict with a predetermined lens. See as a trend of presuppositions going in. And it is problematic because it's one of the pernicious knockoff effects of dogma. I mean, one of the things I have been opposed to since I have started writing with Jen back in 2019 is this idea that, I don't do dogma. I think that when you submit
Is everyone else hearing Wink, or is it just me?
We lost his sound.
Yeah, we lost your sound.
Uh-oh.
Oh, so much fun with live streams and communication. I'm going to text Wink, but Diana, do you want to jump in there with the love and power culture?
Yeah, yeah, and we should probably also mention, right before we got on, Yasmine said she is coming. So just for people who are waiting for her, it's probably going to be another less than 10 minutes. So just wanted to give that for folks. Yeah, I think when we talk about Western liberal values, classical Enlightenment values, a lot do stem from Judeo-Christian values. That doesn't mean that you have to be religious or one or the other, but there is a framework there, and I do think that the core of that framework is a love culture, because between both there's a high value for redemption, forgiveness. The things that we value is in the world, the life here on earth. We don't, for the most part, think of the afterlife, in that we strive for something in that life, right? Martyrdom. But when we talk about the fundamental core of Islam or Islamism, there is a greater external purpose, which is the afterlife, right? Like and so there's not this sanctity of life. I mean, when you have mothers like freely supporting their kids to go perform jihad, and killing a Jew there's nothing better on this earth than to kill a Jew. That's a different value system, and in that same uh, culture, women are subjugated as second-class citizens, and that's one of the things that Yasmine discusses in her book. And so when you take this Western culture that is Canada, America, Australia, and you try and mesh um, a society that doesn't have the same values, there's a natural dissonance that occurs, and that's where we are today. The frustration, I think, is that we don't have enough of a baseline educational foundation on history and understanding why these don't mesh. And so that's where I think a lot of the disconnect, especially what we're seeing in schools and on the college campuses, arises. So, most of us, well, not, I think Wink just jumped off, but like Brandy and I and Xander, we come from a social work, medicine background where, when we look at relationships, and it really is centering the individual human being, not an ideology, not some other greater good out there. It's the person, the human in front of us. And I think that's also one of the biggest disconnects right now, is individual liberties. That's not prioritized in Islamism, right? It's very similar to communism, where there's a greater good, the collective, right? And we know that whenever any greater good or collective is prioritized, and ahead of a human, an individual, atrocities inevitably follow. So that's
I would
kind
love
of.
that. Yeah, I mean, and I think Brandy, you can probably speak to this. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. And I know we're going to have a book club later this year with Asra Nomani, who's written on the Red Green Alliance. But can you shed a little bit more light on what Diana was saying with regards to that kind of hijacking of culture and the where we've seen both Islam and communism kind of come together into some sort of coalition, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I take a slightly different view, hold a slightly different view than Diana, only in it's not. I see that the praise, worship, uplifting of the collective versus the individual in a lot of different cultures, communism, socialist cultures, and some aspects of Islamism, but not all. But I think that the real disconnect between those ideologies and worldviews versus civilizational worldviews isn't the preference for the collective over the individual. It's the willingness to sacrifice the individual for the collective. Because there are a lot of cultures, not just Western cultures, there are Eastern cultures that do put a little bit more preference on the collective, on the family bond over the individual, but not willing to necessarily sacrifice the individual for the collective. And I think that that's one of the real differences that we should probably explore a little bit more, because I don't really see this as a battle between Islamists and Western civilization. I see it as a battle between civilization and de-civilization. And what I mean by that is there is a natural order. The natural order of the parent is to protect their child, not to sacrifice their child, whether Western civilization or Eastern civilization. When you look at any type of ideology that is radical, that is extreme, that's when you have parents turning their children in for being capitalists, as happened in communist states and vice versa. That's where you have parents teaching their kids to strap on homicide, suicide vests to blow themselves up as long as they can kill someone else. That goes against natural order. That goes against civilization. And I think that that's where we're at. And I think it brings about a lot more uncomfortable questions that a lot of people are unwilling to explore. And that really is, are there certain culturals that are completely incompatible with civilization? Not necessarily on an individual level, but on an institutional level.
Interesting. Wink, let's see if you're back in action with your mic. Yeah, and we can.
Oh, good. I don't know what I missed, but I love what I heard Brandy say. I think that's an important point, is that people shy away from some of these hard questions that go towards culture and the impact of culture against the natural order. I'll confess, I've been reticent at times to be as critical of culture as I could be. But I think you have to kind of work through that, because otherwise you're not digging down into the bedrock of what may be the problems in the trend towards decivilization. So that's all I have to say. And I applaud Brandy's perceptive take on the matter.
Well, I've got a question as we're waiting. Like, someone asked me this the other day, and I really found it a good question. What are American values? What is Western liberalism? And I started to answer it, Enlightenment values and, value of the individual, freedom of consciousness, like many of the things that we discussed in discussing this book. But, she pushed back, and she's like, but that, like, the values that you're talking about are values that are held by individuals. She's still outside of laws, like our law that we can have freedom of speech, our laws that, we can protest, etc. She goes, to me, those aren't values. I mean, they might be a value to an individual, but those aren't values. I would love to, like, what in your mind is an American, or we can even just say Western value? What?
Freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, right? Freedom of thought, the freedom to be curious about the world, the freedom to live in inquisitiveness about the world, the ability to perceive the world as an individual, the ability to see the universe as a manifest abundance of the fruits of things like self-reliance and enterprise and industry. American values are the ability to be at one with your personal center and feel affirmed by your larger community, as opposed to feeling an outcast or a black sheep because of your individual values. To me, those are American values.
You see, I find that so interesting because we have seen more and more ideas of collectivism.
Mhm.
Brand touched on it. More people moving towards ideals of socialism and communism, which I do not think are at heart American values the way you just described it. If American values are really centered on the individual
Mm.
versus the collective, then if there are, let's say in some of the studies that we've done, I mean, upwards of 40% of people, I think between the ages of 18 and 34, I want to say that's the number, are leaning towards socialism. So can we say if in that lean towards socialism, the idea of protecting the individual and these individual values is no longer considered important, is it still an American value?
That's an interesting point. And maybe I'm just part of the old guard fuddy-duddy caucus. But I do think that America at its best has echoed those values I just recited. I don't think America has been at its best when we've seen values of socialism and communism and Marxism echoed. For those who are nerds, I take you back to the year 1613 and to a place 10 miles from my hometown where I grew up, Henricus, which was a settlement, the second settlement in Virginia after Jamestown. It doesn't get a lot of play in the literature, but it's very important for this reason. When Henricus was formed, there was this idea of all for one and one for all, that everyone would plant their crops and their trees, and then we would all benefit from bounty. And what happened was people who were lazy and a little bit corrupt, not principled, took advantage of the people who were productive. And so the town nearly starved until Sir Thomas Dale, a new governor, came and said, look, nope, this is not working. We're going to have a system which is based upon enterprise and industry. Those who produce more will receive more. Those who produce less will receive less. And some say that was kind of the genesis of the American dream, the idea of self-reliance. And it worked, because otherwise that town would have died. As it was, it died 10 years later due to the Indian massacre, but that's a different story for another timeline. But the point is, I think the American dream, even in 1613, in the wilderness of Virginia on the banks of the James River, recognized that in the end, there was something about enterprise and self-reliance and industry and self-worth and dignity and individual vision that would produce the abundance which we would later see in our American destiny, our American history. So yeah, I see what you say, Jennifer, but I don't think there's ever been evidence that that's produced a more prosperous America. I would say to the contrary, we almost died out as a colonial country.
We're running a little short on time, so I think our guest has just arrived. So
oh
I'm
yes,
sorry.
yes. As I go on and on. Hey, Yasmine, how you doing?
Hi.
Hi, Yasmine.
Appreciate your patience, all of you. I'm so sorry. I was explaining
Oh,
to
no
Mars,
stress.
it got the wrong time zone got put into my calendar incorrectly. So
Been there, done that. No stress.
I thought I still had 3 hours to go. And he's like, no, you have 3 minutes.
Right.
So,
Well, you're here now. Mars
I
is going to
made
give
it.
a little introduction.
Yes.
And we were just talking about Yasmine, and I'm sure we'll go into this conversation with you being a part of it now, but what is exactly a Western value? What is liberalism? What is an American value? So I'll stop there. Mars, I'll let you go ahead and take the lead on directing us now.
Okay, thank you. Well, everyone, thank you for the for joining us for this book club, and it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend and also someone who I've looked up to as an exemplar of the struggle we're up against regressive culture, and also between regressive leftism and extreme conservatism. A special guest, Yasmine. Yasmine, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mars. It's really an absolute pleasure to be here. And I'm really grateful and honored to call you a friend as well. And I look forward to meeting the rest of you here. Jennifer, you and I kind of know each other a bit. And Wink, I feel like I know you. I've heard your voice so much and I've read so much of your work, and I really do appreciate you a lot. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation, getting to know you all a bit better.
Well, prior to this event, we had 3 separate discussions to discuss the themes that are inside your book. We want to tie them to classical liberalism, but your story was, there's nowhere to describe it. It's incredibly horrific. One of the first things we wanted to ask you about was the theme regarding radical Islam and bodily autonomy. Something that, again, there's no words to describe it, but something that just absolutely horrified all of us is when you were physically and just flagrantly abused by your mother and her husband, and as well as your husband, who you were forced to marry, who you later learned was a former member of Al Qaeda. You also had to deal with like wearing the abaya, the hijab, the niqab under fundamentalist dictates, which allowed your husband to beat and otherwise abuse you. And the shocking thing about all of this happened under the aegis of a modern Western society. And as we understand it, this is not a unique circumstance, but may actually be underreported. And this happened all under a country that claims to support bodily autonomy, and especially with the rights of women to be free of abuse and the right to wear whatever she desires. And there are just few other instances in which I can imagine a betrayal of our values other than a flagrant disregard for this kind of autonomy. Can you speak to the betrayal that you experienced in this regard and how it translates to today's culture war?
Yeah, for sure. So interestingly, the issues with me as an adult, wearing hijab, wearing niqab, being beaten by this man that they forced me to marry, and all that's, I don't really see as a betrayal by the West, the secular country of Canada that I was living in. The betrayal, because at that point I was indoctrinated into it. I felt it was his right to beat me. I wasn't reporting, and law enforcement aren't going to know what's happening in a house, right? So it's kind of like mea culpa at that point. Like they're not responsible for that. However, when I was a child, when I was 13 years old, and Mr. Fabro, who wrote the forward for my book, that Mr. Fabro, when I told him about what was happening at home, and when he alerted the police, and then child services were involved, and then it became this huge investigation and a court case and everything. And in the end, they said, well, this is your culture, this is your religion, this is how your family chooses to discipline you. There's nothing we can do about it. That was the complete and ultimate and total betrayal. Is a betrayal of their own values. We'll speak more to that, Jennifer, on what is a Western value, but it's a betrayal of themselves, and of course a betrayal of me as a young child as well. So that I fully and completely blame. They can fully have the blame for that. But what happens in these instances, as you mentioned, they are underreported. These issues are obviously not only in Islamic households. I'm talking about domestic violence and abuse. But what makes Islamic households different is that the Almighty Allah has sanctioned this. So you don't have the right to complain. And if you do, who is a higher authority than the creator of the universe?
Right.
If the creator of the universe says that a man can beat his wife, then who are you going to complain to that could possibly override that decision? So you just feel like, and if you go to the non-Muslims, if you go to the, law enforcement for help, then you are betraying your own ummah, you're betraying your own community, you're betraying your own people, you're airing out the dirty laundry. Like you become the problem. It's like you're the rat. If this was the mafia, you are the rat. And so you stay silenced because you don't want to be the rat. You stay silenced because you don't want to burn in hell for not listening to Allah. This is what he has sanctioned. So what right do you have to disagree? That's very arrogant of you. And now you're going to burn in hell for that. Right. And you stay quiet because you are indoctrinated. Like the chains, the prison of the mind, that's the deepest, darkest, strongest chains. It doesn't even matter who you're married to or who's controlling you or the country that you're living in. I mean, to a certain extent, all of those things, of course, matter, but the chains that they develop in here first from birth, those are so strong that you could be in the freest country in the world and it wouldn't matter. Or you could be in Iran or Afghanistan or so. It's the same thing because you're so imprisoned in your own mind that yeah, the rest of the obstacles are almost irrelevant.
We talked a little bit about this in the next point I wanted to raise, the idea that you can walk around in a free society, but if you build up a wall inside your own mind, you may as well still be in the cage. We saw instances of this happen in some fundamentalist Jewish communities in New York. We also see this in,
Yeah.
Do you know who Megan Phelps Roper is?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a friend.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, she has her own incredible story in this regard. But I wanted to ask you about your particular experience here in regards to our discussions. One of the principles of liberalism is the autonomy of the individual. And in your book, you mentioned a verse. I don't remember if it was from the Quran or one of the Hadith, but there was a phrase that you mentioned that the mother is the entryway to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to throw it in your book a few times. No offense, because it was just so hard to read. But you were afraid to defy her because you were afraid of going to hell in the afterlife, like you previously mentioned. We saw you struggle with this afterwards to get past whatever effects your religious influences had on you as a youngster. How your childhood friend had to gently help get you out of it, step by step, and how your experiences as a university student just shipped away from that kind of indoctrination. But as I said earlier, a cage, almost a self-reinforcing mechanism that was built around your own mind that in which you were effectively restricting your own autonomy.
Yeah.
Our discussions compared your experiences to that of abuse victims who tried to convince themselves that their abuser was just having a bad day, that they didn't really mean what they said. And so they were programmed to some extent to imprison themselves. Only in your case, it was because of an abusive mother and because of religious fundamentalism. So it sounded like in your book, you had to struggle a lot to accept your own freedom. You had to do so step by step. Did we understand your position correctly when we thought these positions were similar to that of an abuser?
100%. Yeah, 100% correct. I mean, even the language of the Quran, of the God, the monotheistic God of the whole trilogy, love me, worship me, or you're going to burn in hell for eternity.
Yeah.
It's so textbook, so that's what you're raised with, and you're raised with this belief that you are powerless, that Allah makes all the decisions. Anything that you don't get to dictate your own life. So freedom, it's not a concept, it's not a reality, it's not a thing. If anything, as I mentioned in my book, it's spat out at you like a really negative thing. Like, what, you want to be free? You think you want to be free, like these free women here in the West? Like, it's like the most heinous, disgusting thing, right? And so the idea is that you are powerless, you are helpless. Allah makes all the rules, Allah makes all the decisions. You don't get to control your own destiny. And within that, you have this learned helplessness that you just, it's like you're groomed for an abusive relationship. So by the time you end up being married to somebody who says, cook me the dinner the way I want it to be cooked, or I'm going to punch you in the face, it's no different. We're following the same pattern here. And you don't have an education, you don't have a job, you don't have friends, you don't have a support system. So you are helpless. Like, all of it is just a repetition of the same concepts that have been groomed into you from childhood. And so, yes, it is exactly the same. And to overshare a little bit here, which is something that I haven't spoken about publicly yet, is that you think that you're getting yourself, at least I thought I was getting myself out. I wrote a book. I'm like being vocal about leaving Islam. I got away from this abusive relationship. I thought I was like moving away from all of these things, not realizing that it was actually really still in my nervous system. It was still in my brain. It was still in my bones. It was still in my body. I thought getting the degrees, getting the job, getting the car, getting the house, getting free, I thought that was all healing. But it wasn't until I had a really bad breakdown where I was agoraphobic. I was suicidal. It was absolutely horrible. And Sam Harris actually is one of the people that really helped to get me out of that. And he introduced me to, of course, meditation, because that's what he would do. This was back in the day, too, before he had his app or anything. And led me to this discovery of how much all of these mechanisms I was talking about that had been groomed into me were still there. And that's when I discovered that slowly, this was not by any means a light bulb moment,
Right.
that I was in yet another abusive relationship, except this time it was really covert. I thought an abusive relationship meant he swore at you, he hit you, he spat at you. That's what it meant to me. I didn't know that it could mean lying to you, being deceptive, being manipulative, hot and cold, and what you just said there, Mars, about, oh, he's having a bad day. Very familiar with that, because yes, I can't believe he would do something so cruel, but then the next day he'd do something so kind. And then you're like, which one is he?
Hot and
Is
cold.
he a bad person that does the odd good thing to keep me on the hook? Or is he a good person that just does the odd bad thing because he's having a bad day? And then you're stuck in this cognitive dissonance. It's no different than what I went through with Islam. It's exactly the same.
Wow.
I couldn't believe how I was I'm such easy prey for any predator at that point, because it's like, oh, this is somebody who overgives, she's over empathetic, she's so good at self-criticism, and she'll never look to me and be like that I'm the problem, because of course I'll just bring up some childhood issue that I had or some other sob story that's going to get her to over empathize with me. And you get stuck in this cycle until yet again I married a male version of my mother. It's the exact same thing. So it was in my book, I talk about with my mom, I did everything she wanted. I'll marry the jihadi. I'll wear the niqab. I'll do everything. And then it just came down to my daughter in the end, when they said, we're going to take your daughter and mutilate her genitals, where I was like, okay, now we're done. And the same thing had to happen again with my second daughter. He wasn't threatening to mutilate her genitals this time. But what happened was she could see that he was lying to me. And I realized, if I stay with this man, I'm teaching my daughter it's okay to stay with a man who lies to you.
Right.
And even though I really did not want to go through a divorce, I was willing to stay in my delusional lying to myself rather than starting over a new chapter in my life. But looking at my daughter and realizing, okay, this child is going to learn from me, whether consciously or subconsciously, she's going to understand that when her partner lies to her, she should just suck it up, forgive, and keep going. And so I couldn't do it.
I think that was around the time I first met you. I remember you having a hard time getting your book published because no one could get it out there. But I'm thankful that it did, and I'm really thankful that Sam really put forth the effort to try to get it out there. And now a lot of people, including us, have read it. So it's a vitally important message that we all need to hear. We also talked about the idea between the different cultures, between one that values love and life, the other one that values power. I don't, for the life of me, I don't understand why people
values death.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Douglas Murray speaks about this. I went to one of his talks a few months ago in which he made the claim that he doesn't, it's so weird how we can't see it today, because it was only about 80 years ago we dealt with another death cult when imperialist Japan came in to fight World War II, and everyone saw that death cults do exist because of those kamikaze pilots during World War II. And now we're dealing with fundamentalist Islam. But we talked a lot about cultural relativism and the difference in values. One stake is concerned with what happens in this life, and another stake is planted that celebrates death and martyrdom. Classical liberalism is based off the idea that you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as long as you don't impose those ideas on anyone else. And your freedom to wave your hands around ends exactly 2 inches in front of someone else's nose. And from that idea, you built off a series of laws and institutions to make sure that we can all get along. But nowadays, there's such an emphasis on multiculturalism that even those norms are just being violated because of white guilt and the recent culture, the imperialism of the past. But in reality, each culture has practiced.
Mm-hmm.
An idea that we talked about was that maybe multiculturalism isn't the thing that we should be aiming to establish, but we should be looking for a multi-ethnic one. We're not suggesting in any way that there's nothing to learn. There's art, music, certain cultural norms that enhance the quality of life. But if we forget our cultural values based in classical liberalism, especially affirming values that are not staked in something like life affirming or even acknowledging the rules of freedom we have as we know it, we lose the ideas that have been at the cutting edge of human rights for 300 years. But I think I already know your answer to this, but how far does multiculturalism go?
Oh my gosh, you've touched on so many things there, Mars. There's so many things I want to respond to. First of all, can I just say I absolutely love this idea of multi-ethnic versus multicultural. I've never heard it expressed in that way, and you are absolutely correct. Especially here in Canada, we have just been obsessed with this idea of multiculturalism since the 70s, and we look at America with disdain and we say, oh, they're a melting pot. They all become American. Whereas we're like a mosaic. We all keep our cultures, and then it's like a little wall between each each little, tile. However, in the end, we're like this beautiful mosaic. But you are absolutely correct, because what's happened in that time span is we have essentially lost any and all culture. Like we anything that is, it will be very difficult for you to get an answer if you ask a Canadian, what is Canadian culture? Our culture is now just it's just a muddle of other cultures being mixed in to the point that we are cultureless. So that's a really interesting conversation. I feel like there should be an entire episode just on that. That is so important. I think right now we're really suffering greatly with a lot of self-flagellation, a lot of self-hate, a lot of focusing on the negative things that we have achieved here in the West, and not looking at the negative things that have happened in other countries. Like you mentioned, things that we've done that civilizations have done since the beginning of time, but it's like, no, it's only bad when the West does it, right? So I love to talk about how Malcolm X went to Saudi Arabia. And of course, he's in Saudi Arabia. He's become a Muslim now. He's talking about the white devil, and he's talking about how the Muslims are beautiful and they're his African people. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is buying and selling Black human beings while he's standing in Saudi Arabia. They only stopped slavery in the 60s, and that was because of pressure from the United Kingdom. Because they found oil, and the United Kingdom said, well, we're not going to help you get it out of the ground unless you stop buying and selling human beings. Mm-hmm. And so they were forced to. And because they made haram, which Allah has made halal, and by that I mean they had forbidden something that Allah had said was permissible, they received so much pushback from the mullahs and the imams and the scholars and the leaders all around the Islamic world saying, you can't make slavery. You can't abolish slavery because it's part of our religion. Allah says that we can do it. To this day, slavery is still very normalized. In fact, Afghanistan just released, I'm sure you guys have, I see some nodding, that they've now legitimized slavery. It's on the books. And, Mauritania, Libya, you're going to find a lot of Muslim majority countries that are still going to engage in it. It may not be out in the open, but you saw what happened with Yazidi women in Iraq and Syria. Mm-hmm. They're buying and selling them in markets, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea that we would never criticize Arab slavery, which went on a lot, started way before the West was a thing. We are not going to criticize Arab and Muslim colonialism. We're not going to talk about the fact that a quarter of the planet is Muslim. How did that happen? Rainbows and butterflies, right? We're not going to address that. We're going to say we're anti-colonialist. Somehow Iran now, speaking of cognitive dissonance, the fact that the Islamic regime of Iran is now lauded as the heroes. There's all of this crying and people are so upset. The most evil regime to ever exist on the planet that has a rule that if a young girl is out protesting and she gets caught by the police and she's going to be executed, that the guards need to rape her so that when she dies, she won't go to heaven. That's the rules of this Islamic regime. This is just one tiny little thing. Like, this is the most heinous, evil, bloodthirsty regime. The women of Iran have been screaming for years about women life freedom. Just the act of removing a piece of cloth off their head will get them imprisoned or killed. And somehow you have feminists in the West, leftists in the West, not happy that this regime is finally coming down. You see the Iranian people are all over the globe dancing. In Iran, they're dancing in the streets, singing their jubilation. They're crying tears of joy. They just cannot believe that finally, after 47 years, their hostage, the regime that has been keeping them hostage is finally going to get dismantled, right? Ayatollah Khomeini was finally killed.
Right.
And they're confused about that. They look at that and they're like, but wait, he says death to Israel and death to America, so he must be the good guy.
That's cognitive dissonance, if you can believe it. And we saw what happened in Masa Amini just a few years ago, and there was crickets from Western feminists, and like, yeah. I take what you say about slavery very much to account, because like I'm very much a student of the Enlightenment, and I saw how it drags Western society forward from fundamentalism, kicking and screaming into the modern world, and that's why there's such an effort made to reform Islam, because the dictates, the religion has to be modernized for the modern world. But anyway, I could talk to you about this stuff forever. I have so many things I like to discuss with you on the subject, but we're running short of time. I like to turn the discussion over to our audience. We have so many burning questions we just want to ask you. So I'm going to turn it over to the wonderful individuals I have here who have something they want to ask you. So Jennifer, if you want to take the floor, why don't you get us started off there?
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, Yasmine, as you were coming in, and you kind of have touched on this with the whole idea of multiculturalism, because one of the things before this, I really understood what multiculturalism, what it really meant in practice. I thought it was lovely. Much like I think diversity is lovely, right? When we were talking, when you came on, we were talking about American values and what are American values. And honestly, I'm not so sure that we can really define them anymore. I hope I'm wrong. Wink can tell me that I was wrong, but I'm afraid that what we've seen between kind of the red-green alliance is people have actually, the values that we would have assumed were American values, which for me would be value of the individual, the freedoms that we have, freedom of speech, the liberty and whatnot. And I think that more and more, when you look at new trends in Sharia law, when you look at new trends in kind of Marxism, communism, socialism coming into the mainstream, I don't know that we have a majority of people who could even say what an American value is. You add to that multiculturalism, and there really isn't then an American value. And I think in some ways, and I do agree with Mars, I love the idea of multi-ethnic because I love diversity. Mm-hmm. But when we frame it as multiculturalism, then there is not really an American value. And I'm wondering, my question for you is, am I wrong? Like, do you see a value that you're like, yeah, this is it? Like, we need, and if I'm not wrong, what do you think that we need to do if we're to survive this kind of multicultural phenomena, if you will?
So I think you did identify what our cultural, what is most important to Americans, and you talked about it there. You talked about freedom, you talked about freedom of speech, you talked about freedom of religion, freedom of anything, freedom of expression. As long as the word freedom is in there, that feels very American to me. A lot of cultures very much disagree with that. You know what I mean? And those are the cultures that we are celebrating, that we're bringing in, and we're confusing. And there's I think one of the points that really brings this home is hijab. I talk about hijab a lot because I think that it's something that is tangible, that people can see and understand. So for example, when we talk about multiculturalism, people get really confused and they think, well, we'll put a hijabi on this advertisement or this movie or everywhere, every flat surface, they're putting a picture of a hijabi, right? Because they think, oh, this is culture. Of course, it has nothing to do with culture, that's religion. And you wouldn't do the same with, putting somebody with a turban on, or putting somebody with Mormon underwear on the cover of Sports Illustrated. You wouldn't put a Nike swoosh on, Baptist bond or whatever. I don't know, whatever it is, fundamentalist, different religions. We're not going to be celebrating those, but somehow when it comes to Islam, it's like, ooh, that's exciting. Please, by all means, bring a Muslim woman from Pakistan, bring a Muslim woman from Egypt, bring a Muslim woman from, Ethiopia, bring them all. Let this be a beautiful, just colorful group of beautiful women in your advertisement, right? I love multi-ethnicity. Of course, I want everybody to feel represented, seen, and heard. But I absolutely do not want to be representing any ideologies. We don't want to be, we're supposed to be a secular nation. We're supposed to be about freedom of expression. We're supposed to be about freedom of religion. And why are we so obsessed with this one religion? Why is that the only religion that gets to be represented when we're talking about multiculturalism? So I think that when we go to Mars's idea of multi-ethnic versus multicultural, then it takes away that confusion, because there's a lot of really negative, horrible things in different cultures, right? And we're not going to be celebrating those things. And I like to remind people that culture is dynamic and it's meant to be criticized. I mean, we used to throw virgins into volcanoes, for goodness sake, right? Slavery was part of culture. We did the most horrible things. And feminism, like just the idea of women voting, women getting a credit card, all of these things, these are new parts of our culture that we have progressed, we've pushed in order to get these things. If you take a look at something like the hijab and okay, this is religiously forced misogyny. This is purity culture, this is modesty culture, this is rape culture, this is victim blaming. And you take something like that and you say, I am going to celebrate this thing. You are fossilizing this regressive, barbaric thing in place. And you're saying, let's uplift it. Instead of looking at it and saying, that's something that we need to progress past. There's women out in the streets literally dying to scream about how they don't want to be forced into this clothing. Look at the women of Afghanistan. Now it's down to the one eye. They're only allowed to show one eye when they leave their homes, to go to very limited places that they're allowed to go, right? So this is what happens if we're looking at something so regressive and horrible and barbaric and we're saying, let's uplift it. Like you're doing such a disservice to humanity. Like you have earned these freedoms. You get to enjoy these freedoms. And instead of looking to your sisters in other countries and saying, uplift you so you can come on up here and have these freedoms with me. You're like looking down at her and you're like, yeah, you stay down there. In fact, good for you. Good for you. I'm going to put you on the cover of a magazine because you look so great in your misogyny garb, right? It's cruel. It's cruel and heartless. And it's mean, but it's also really stupid.
Mm.
I'd like to turn the next question over to Brandy. Brandy, would you like to go move ahead?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to meet you, Yasmine. I think that when I think about American values, we talk about like freedom, the individual liberty. The fundamental thing that I see as an American value is choice.
Yeah.
And I think about the ideologies that we're seeing, Islamist ideology, socialism, communism, Marxism. Those fundamentally are anti-choice ideologies. And that being said, to me, they're then fundamentally incompatible with American culture. An anti-choice culture cannot be compatible with a choice culture. But I also hear what Jen said earlier in a conversation with Wink about the growing number of younger Americans who are gravitating towards anti-choice ideology. And I just wonder if you think that that's a psychological shift that we're seeing, this desire to actually be dictated to. Is there a growing, is that side growing, not only because they don't understand the benefits and values, the rights and responsibilities of liberty and freedom and choice, but is there a desire to actually be dictated to? And if so, how concerned should we be? Because those types of anti-choice movements, anti-liberty movements will only grow because they seem appetizing or appealing.
Completely agree with you, Brandy. And I think that the reason why it looks appetizing and appealing is because it's sold to them on TikTok with very successful propaganda. I don't think that they thought about it as much as you have. I don't think that they realize that these things are anti-choice. They don't see that. They think of it as cool and trendy. That's what they see it. This is like the latest trend. They don't, I mean, let's give people a break. Maybe what we're talking about are people who are still under 25, their prefrontal cortex is still not fully developed. You know what I mean? But you're right. We do see that happening for sure. And I like to believe, I hope, I mean, I cannot tell you how distressing, frustrating, maddening it was for me to be walking in the streets of London, UK, or Toronto, Ontario, Canada, or anywhere and seeing stickers, pro Hamas stickers, basically saying like, yay, the resistance, and talking about anti-colonialism and Hamas in the same sentence, or saying queers for Palestine. You know, like I just finished reading a book by a man named Hamza, who's going to be coming on my podcast, born and raised in Gaza. And he tells the story of how when they would figure out that somebody was a homosexual, they would tie them to the back of a motorcycle and drive around the streets until the person was just, their body was just body parts everywhere. That's what they do to gay people there. And so the ones that are like strippers for Palestine or whatever for Gaza, like they're confusing. They think that these things mean freedom. They don't know that these things are anti-freedom. They don't know that these things are anti-choice. And my hope is that when they stay with the thought for longer than 3 seconds, they'll start to realize, oh, wait a minute. Did I just support murderers of babies and peacekeepers and women and innocent people, families, entire families being slaughtered in their homes? Am I supporting this? Like, there has to be a moment where they wake up from the scrolling that feeds them whatever garbage is being fed to them. Because make no mistake, like the what we talk about, like Russian propaganda, it's now like Muslim propaganda, there's Chinese propaganda, like it's all in there, and they know how to use social media. And what are we countering with? Thoughtful ideas, intellect, history, right? Like we're not up. I was standing in Israel and somebody showed me on somebody else's TikTok, shared hundreds of thousands of times, talking about, look, Iran is destroying Jerusalem. I'm standing in Jerusalem. We're fine. You know? But they're like, wow, hundreds of thousands of rockets. Look at the what's happening to Jerusalem. And they have footage. I don't know where you got this footage from, but everybody's sharing it and they're all celebrating and they're all happy because, you know, that's the thing that connects all these groups, all of these anti-West groups, all of these anti-freedom groups, all of these anti-choice groups is their anti-Semitism. Like that's always the connecting tissue, right? So my hope is that I agree with you. Yes, I don't want to believe that it's because they want to be controlled. I think it's because they still have not reached the point of using their brains to realizing that being fed something versus having the freedom to choose something. Do you know what I mean? Like you're still a kid. You're just used to being fed things. Look at for the answers in the back. This is the right answer in the test. Do you know what I mean? Like they're just maybe in our schools, we do a lot of indoctrination. We do a lot of not teaching, you know, not teaching. We teach them like this is right and this is wrong rather than teaching them how to think. We tell them what to think versus teaching them how to think. And that's maybe comfortable for them. It's lazy. It's, you know, it's obviously not all, but I like to believe that it's because they still haven't come up against a reason to push back against it. Do you know what I mean? Like when it starts to get to the point where they're like, wait, but I don't want to do that. Why don't I get the choice to do that? When they hit that wall, then they'll realize, oh wait, no, actually I don't want to be a part of this. But they just haven't hit it yet.
But there's definitely something said to be about being young and dumb. So,
Yeah.
Diane, do you want to go next? Diana?
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Wayne. Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, it's an honor to meet you after reading your book, and you know, it resonated a lot with me. I'm also an immigrant from the former Soviet Union, so there's some overlap. Nothing, you know, obviously to the extent that you went through. And I'm also a neurologist, so you know, I find that a lot of what it's going to take is actually for people to process their own. I think trauma is a word that's overused, but ultimately, it's people have almost been brainwashed into a cult when they can, you know, see what was going on, you know, with you, and then say, "Oh, that's just culture." I mean, that's cult-like thinking. How do you get out of a cult? You have to almost process the emotions of whatever got you in there, and then with grace and self-compassion, try and, you know, get out. And my biggest question for you is, do you think we're past the point of no return? And for me, it's seeing the reaction to this war in Iran. I would have thought, okay, this is like the foundation that everyone can agree on, that right versus wrong, evil, but you know, but seeing some of the reactions, I'm like, wow, I think we may be past, and not to be a downer here because you just said your hope, but I'm losing hope. Yeah. So how do we get past this? Like, what, you can't force someone, you know, they say you don't want to look Medusa in the eye or you'll turn to stone, right? Some things people don't want to, they rather just keep going like dutiful soldiers. What can we do? I mean, that's, I think, why we're all on this call and fighting the good fight. How do we get past this? Is my question.
Yeah. So truthfully, Diana, I oscillate between feeling hopeful and feeling despondent, right? They're just on October 8th, I tweeted like, this is it. We're done now. Now everybody will get it. Like you've seen Shani Luke on the back of that pickup truck. there are no more questions. Like everything is clear now. And boy, I had no idea how wrong I was. So when I saw all of this madness, like the cover, like Canadian newspapers have to make AI generated images of women in hijab crying over Khamenei's picture because they're not going to be able to find this in real life. Right. But they're not, heaven forbid, they post anything about the hundreds of thousands of people that are in the streets screaming and dancing and partying and jubilation. Right. No, let's doctor an image so that it looks like the Iranian people are sad. And of course, the headlines are all about like, oh, he led his powerful country for 47 years and made it a political powerhouse and all their garbage. So when I see that kind of stuff, honestly, maybe I'm just so jaded at this point. I don't know, but like after what happened on October 7th, that for me was the moment where I just was so shocked that people, like you just said, there's no moral ambiguity here. It's so obvious. What are we talking about? You can see they recorded it themselves, but somehow they found a way to twist and turn. I can't even begin to understand how they found a way to make Israelis the bad guys in that situation. And somehow Hamas are the resistance fighters so I wasn't surprised to see this continuation of like this perversion of reality by the, I guess we'll call them the left, but really it's just mainstream at this point. But we're getting louder. We're getting stronger. There are a lot of, I'm sure you've heard the term October 8th Jew, right? Like most of all of my friends pretty much are secular atheist. I cannot tell you how many secular atheist Jewish friends I have that have started to wear their Star of David, that have started to go to the JCC, that have started to go to the synagogue, that have started to have Shabbat dinners again. Like they started to go back to their roots because they had been blood, sweat, and tears fighting on the left, screaming in the front lines of Black Lives Matter, et cetera, et cetera. And to see how they were just betrayed like in a heartbeat on October 8th made them realize like, oh, wow. So everything we've been told, which we thought was like paranoia, like constantly being told by our older family members, like never forget, don't relax, pay attention. And we're like, it's fine. It's old news, right? Like, it's like, okay, they were right. It is really not old news. And so those October 8th Jews being activated is amazing to see. It was really beautiful for me because I'd been screaming in this space for a very long time into a dark chasm because I experienced the exact same thing they did. I was so, as a Muslim, of course you're conservative, religious, fully right wing, right? Misogyny, like homophobia, anti-Semitism, all of that stuff was just rampant. So when I left that religion, I just, as you would, the pendulum swings, right? I flung to the left. I was like, yes, Green Party, I'm one of you. Like, this is my people, freedom, yay. And to see how they not just silenced me or ignored me, but treated me with disdain. Like you were saying, Mars, like, oh, that's hateful. That's homophobic. Or sorry, that's Islamophobic. I had a conversation with a friend of mine that I went to high school. He went to Catholic schools, and the kinds of stuff he says about, Catholic school, Catholic priests, Catholic people, I can't even repeat here, right? But for me to speak about my experience leaving Islam was like, he's like, I didn't know. Why are you being so hateful? You're really angry. And I said to him, like, why is it okay for you to criticize the religion that you were raised in against your will, but it's not okay for me to do so? When I do it, it's hateful. When I do it, it's Islamophobic. Now there's a term for it. Nobody's calling you Catholicophobic. And then he was like, oh, yeah, I get it, I guess. But because he's been raised to believe, well, Catholic means white, means Western, so let's criticize it till the cows come home. But Muslim means brown and, from the East. So don't you dare say a word, because that makes you a bigot and a racist and an Islamophobe. So what you're essentially telling me is you don't see us as equal human beings. You don't see that I'm just as entitled to freedom as you are. And I'm just as entitled to my freedom of expression as you are, because I have brown skin and my family comes from this country or that country. So they don't realize that through their like anti-racist ideas, they are actually being the racists, right? That's the cultural relativism that you're referring to, Mars. Like that's that toxic idea, moral relativism as well. So yeah, Diana, I don't know, but again, I'm going to be, if I wasn't a hopelessly optimistic person, I wouldn't be alive today,
Right,
honestly.
right.
So I'd like to believe that, like, so when I feel like there is actually a shift, I feel actually better. I have a lot more allies now than I did, 10 years ago. That's for sure. And I think if I tried to publish my book today, it would be a very different reception than back in 2019.
And to add what
So
sorry.
I think things are changing. I think people's eyes are opening. It's a very sad, negative, horrible thing. All of these things are to happen, but it allows light to shine in the dark places. It lifts up rocks and they scuttle out, and now we know where they are and what they're thinking and what they're saying, So it's actually helpful. We had university professors in Montreal, Canada, screaming to their students, go back to Poland. We wouldn't know. We wouldn't, if they didn't have the audacity to speak that way to Jewish students publicly, then we wouldn't know that they're in their classrooms and what they're teaching, right? What they're indoctrinating our kids with.
So you think we reached the climax of hate and now there is a shift happening? You feel, because that's what I mean, of course I have hope. I wouldn't be doing any of this, and because I have children, right? It's because this is, I think, where I bonded so much with you as the author, because everything you did was because you had children, right?
I don't mean to interrupt, but we're running a little short on time. I need to move on to our last question there. I'm sorry, Diana. But
yeah, no, I definitely.
Apologies. Okay.
Mars, were you trying to talk? Are you muted?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry. Looks like my microphone is weird.
I guess that's a no. Can anybody else hear Mars?
Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can hear him. Yeah,
I can hear you.
Yeah.
What? What's going on? How come I can't hear him?
Oh,
You're muted from just me. This is
No,
racism.
that's crazy. Well, I know if you can hear me, Yasmin, I know where he was going. Okay, Mars was gonna Wink. We were gonna let Wink wrap us up and with his questions for you. So
yeah, I am.
Sorry, I'm long-winded, guys.
Oh no stress.
We're so grateful for your time.
You can hear me?
I can't hear Wink.
Why
can I only hear you, Jennifer?
Mars, can you hear me?
No.
I can hear you.
Diana, say something.
Hello. Can you hear me?
So you know what this is? This is discrimination against the men.
That's right.
This is misandry.
It must be.
I can't hear Wink either.
Oh no.
Can you guys hear him?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Well, Wink, why don't you say your question and I'll interpret.
That sounds good. That works wonderfully.
A strange thing to happen.
Well, first of all, it is such a wonderful treat and delight to meet you. I read your book, and I have to say it was one of the most difficult books I've ever read. It was a book that spoke from the heart, and it said important things about human dignity and the individual. Um, your book resonated with me because I, as a default position, see the human, the individual. I don't see necessarily skin color. I don't relate to people in that way. I love people who are independent minded, quirky, curious, inquisitive, and you checked all of those boxes, Yasmin. You checked all of those boxes. My question is, given how much you've gone through and given your personal growth and transition over time, your transformation, are you today at a place of peace at the center, or do the old wounds and heartaches still reverberate in your very bones? That was one of the questions I had, and I actually wrote a short book review of your book, and that was one of my endings: is has Yasmine now found peace at the center when all is said and done?
So Yasmin,
Go
did you
for it,
hear
Jen.
any of that? Did you?
Not a
Okay,
word.
okay. Oh my goodness, my heart breaks because, well, Wink was just saying, obviously it was just an honor. It's an honor to be here.
Yes.
But his big question is, have you found peace at your center? And I think you kind of addressed this. It's really interesting that you said you hadn't come out with some of this information, or are you still kind of dealing with some of the trauma of the past? So in a nutshell, have you found peace? And if not, kind of where are you still dealing with the trauma of your history?
Well done, Jen.
Well, I hesitate to say
Thank you.
yes because I would have said yes before too. Wink, I just heard you.
Oh, good. Great.
No,
We
I
make
didn't.
contact.
So it was somebody else
connection.
talking. Sorry.
Good. No stress.
We had hope for a moment. But Diana mentioned self-compassion, and that's been a really huge learning for me I'm really good at being angry at myself, at criticizing myself. Two things have really shifted for me in a way that was inconceivable before. Number one, self-love, and number two, self-compassion. So I would say at least I feel like I'm on a conscious path to healing, whereas before I think I had made a lot of changes in my life, but I had not gone in, like I never spent the time to look inwards. I was so busy healing outwards. That was my organization. It was like, let me help all the ex-Muslims across the globe. Come to me. I'm your mama. What do you need? Just let me make it better. It was all about healing out there, out everyone. Just giving and not realizing that was a trauma response. I was doing that in the hopes that it would heal me somehow, And what I needed to do, and this is the self-love part, because it felt selfish and wrong, but what I needed to do was pull back, take the oxygen mask, put it on my own face, and then that would make me a better person with being able to help others because I would have more strength. But I really, until I understood self-love, because you hear the term, but you don't know what it means. You don't know what is that?
Yeah.
Like on a pragmatic, tangible, what does that mean, self-love? I didn't get it. It took me a long time to get it. And what really helped for me was just dealing with a lot of just inner child work. My daughter looks a lot like me when I was young. And so in the beginning of all this inner child work, I had to think of myself as my daughter. Like, how would I react to her? How would I protect her? How would I help her? How would I love her? And then I started to give myself that love and protection and support. I reparented myself essentially,
Mm.
you know, started to treat myself with the same fierce love that I treat my children with, you know, the way like it. I'll still remember that Catherine stole my daughter's eraser in second grade. Like, don't you come near my kids. You know what I mean? So in eighth grade, she's inviting Catherine for a sleepover. And I'm like, isn't she the one that stole your eraser?
Right.
You know? So suddenly I started to have that kind of love for myself. Not suddenly, it was a process. But to be able to have that kind of love for myself and to be able to, this is a weird thing. I would for the longest time, and sometimes I still do it, is when I'm feeling very stressed or panicked or nervous or spiraling, I will feel like I'm speaking to my inner child, and I'll say, like, what do you need right now? First of all, I'd validate her. Like, you have every right to be scared right now. I understand why you're scared. It's a very scary situation. And calm her fears, and then offer her whatever love and support she needs. And I know what she needs because she's me. And
Right.
so, and then
Yeah.
I just, would give myself that grace, that compassion. So thank you for the question, Wink. You're such a wonderfully, you have such a heart of light. Like you're, it comes through. I really want to meet you. You're such an incredibly wonderful human being. And I'm honored and grateful that you took an interest in my book and that we were connected through this ILV platform.
Well,
Yeah, we
I'm
are.
honored and blessed that you wrote the book and you had a chance to shine light on things too few people are aware of. And so, in a way, you did all of us here in the podcast and in the outer world a great service. It is a great service to communicate truth about the human condition. That's my position.
So Yasmine, if you did not hear him, he couldn't. We love Wink because he just closes out everything with he just has always the right words. And so now I'm going to try to
I'm the lyricist.
You are the poet. It's so crazy that you can't hear him, but we're saying that, like, your book has been so enlightening for us. We are so grateful for the courage that you had to write. We're thankful for that. And we're grateful for the hope that you are giving us through, like, your writing, through being here today. So thank you. We hope that we can maybe do this again and not have as many sound issues.
Yes.
Yes, of course. And I'll make sure that it's in my calendar correctly.
Yeah. Well, with that, thank you for everything. For our audience, you can find us on Substack, ilvalues.substack.com, and continue to join us on these various very important conversations. Thank you, Yasmine.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.